Last time when I met you, I was so inspired by our discussion. I felt that you have the ability to motivate people. So what I want to find out from you, Susan, how did you end up becoming the CEO of BRAC USA?
By accident. I answered yes to the request of the founder of BRAC, Sir Fazli Hassan Abed. So when Abed asked, would you help us to start a BRAC USA, of course, the only answer was yes. And because I lived in Bangladesh many years ago, back in the 80s, working with the Ford Foundation, we had gotten to know firsthand the good work of this amazing organization that really does accompany people, really poor people, and enable them to help themselves get out of poverty and create a better life for their families and themselves. So we had a meeting uptown at the Columbia School of Public Health. Alan Rosenfield was the dean of the School of Public Health. He had been there for 25 years, in fact, and he had known BRAC. And he convened a meeting of about 30 or 40 people, some who knew BRAC, others who didn't. And the question was, is this a good idea for us to create a BRAC USA with the mission to tell the story and share the knowledge and insights from BRAC's amazing work in Bangladesh, and see if we could mobilize resources of all kinds to help it work, not in Bangladesh, but in other countries. Because BRAC had, for a variety of reasons, started to work in other countries in Asia and Africa. And foreign exchange is not allowed by the government of Bangladesh to leave Bangladesh. So we needed to raise money from the public, really for the first time. And as I sat around with the others and said, yes, I'll be the volunteer, and I think I was elected to be the first secretary-treasurer, the Dean Rosenfield and Richard Cash, who had been a long-time Bangladesh friend, and in fact, he's the one who helped to discover oral rehydration solution. He's a professor at Harvard. The three of us became the founding board, and they immediately said, okay, Susan, we appoint you to go out and raise the money and make this happen. Well, what could I do but say yes? And Alan Rosenfield at that time actually had been diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And it was amazing that he chose to use the last 2 years of his life to breathe life into BRAC USA. So it was all I could do, first as a volunteer the first year, then when I succeeded in raising the capital and had visited the work of BRAC in Afghanistan, in Uganda, in Tanzania, and South Sudan, I thought, wow, this is worth betting on. So I decided to throw my lot in full time, and I hired myself.
One of the things I want our audience to know, that where you are today, what do you think made yourself successful? I know you're a highly educated person, you have dedicated your life for poor people, but what contributed to your success?
I come from a humble family in Louisiana, born in New Orleans, and I grew up in a relatively sheltered environment. I didn't really know that you had to apply in advance to go to college. Anybody who went to university just went to the local state school, where I, in fact, did end up going my first year. So you're missing one of my universities, the University of Southwestern Louisiana, the home of the Ragin' Cajuns. And that's where I started my freshman year, because I literally only started thinking about what I wanted to do or be in life when I was graduating from high school, which I think is the experience of so many young people. And it's hard to know where you fit, where you belong, what you want to do, and how to discover the gifts that you have inside, and then be able to put those gifts to use. So for me, I knew that I was curious about the world, and I wanted a chance to go out and discover the things that I'd only read about. and one thing led to another. When I heard about Georgetown School of Foreign Service and that you could study international relations from a cross-cultural perspective, and the history and the politics and the economics and the theology and the philosophy, I thought, what could be better? So you see, I couldn't limit myself. My appetite was very big, and maybe it's coming from this big appetite that I've ended up having the most privileged kind of career. It's not that I'm such a good person, or, you know, I'm no Mother Teresa. I've been able to work with the most interesting social entrepreneurs on the planet. I know the poorest people, and I know the richest people. And I've been able to be, in a very small way, a connector.
What role your mentors played to shape your life? Do you have mentors?
I've always had mentors in my life from early on. I think the belief in me from my father and mother was important, and there was always a special teacher along the way. And those teachers, and then later professors, people in the workplace, who I've still kept in touch with along the way, have been very important in helping to expose me to big new ideas, to things beyond my ken, to give me the confidence and the courage to try. Because when you come from a place like Bangladesh or Louisiana, we're very similar, Russell. You don't have a lot of positive reinforcement about the place that you come from. You know, we're used to being on the bottom of the list of everything important in terms of human development or well-being, or right? We'll be top on the list with indicators like corruption and disasters, and right? Mm-hmm. So mentors open your world. They reinforce your heart. They provoke, inspire, and guide. Mentors have always been important to me, so I feel a great responsibility to actually, now that I've crossed over that line of 50 a while ago, so I do whatever I can always to give a hand up to young people. Or actually folks who are trying to figure out what to do with their third career, right? As they've finished working in the rat race, and now they want to do something that makes their heart sing.
I believe you spent 4 to 5 years living in Bangladesh?
Yes, 4.5.
What was your overall experience over there?
I had such a great 4.5 years living in Bangladesh back in the 80s. I went there first in 1986, and I discovered by going halfway around the world important insights about myself and this country. And it wasn't until I could see this country from the other side of the world that I began to understand the intersection of race, class, sexism, poverty, of how our minds are conditioned to take one route or another, to understand also the ways people can change their own fate and create different futures. So Bangladesh is a lot like Louisiana in terms of rice, sugarcane, a delta, hot, humid climate, mosquitoes, spicy food, corrupt politics. It's all of that. But we also have in Bangladesh like half the population of the U.S. packed into just one state, the size of Louisiana or Wisconsin or whichever one you want to pick. So you don't ever go anywhere without having people around you. And that was a shock. That lack of privacy, the inability to just walk around freely and not be followed by hundreds of people. In fact, the only place I could do that really was on the golf course. And fortunately, the dictator, General Ershad, at the time, had taken over the golf course before the country, and the only golf course was on the military cantonment. But they welcomed single girls and expatriates, so Fortunately, I found my way to go out and walk uninterrupted, for 3 hours in nature by playing golf. And my father had taught me to play when I was a little girl, at like age 5. So it was one of those skills that I had far back in the recesses of my memory, but it became a very important bridge builder. What I discovered in adjusting to Bangladesh is that I just needed to spend time with people. I needed to share the food, which of course is very similar, good spicy curries and seafood and rice. That's a staple of Louisiana Cajun cooking. So I felt right at home there. The music, wonderful tablas and very soulful, poetic love songs or fun country songs. People love to sing and to dance and to share stories, and are very family oriented. And when I was able to, have enough time to get to know the sweetness of the people and visit enough places in the countryside where I saw the incredible beauty of the countryside with these green rice fields and beautiful, abundant papaya trees, and you can't help but appreciate a country that's that resourceful. I mean, there's the longest beach, I think, white beach anywhere, right? The Chittagong to Cox's Bazar on the way to Burma. Gorgeous, and was totally undeveloped at that time. The slogan in Bangladesh, the tourist agency, was "Come before the tourists do," and that's part of, I guess, what I felt is it was one of the great places where you really could be transported to another time. Very few. There were only like 2 5-star hotels. There were very few restaurants. There was one television station that was controlled. I didn't have a phone for 2 years.
But things started to change.
Oh my God. No, it's radically different now. This is, almost 30 years ago. So, I could be the only foreigner that anybody would have ever seen when I went to villages. Nowadays, there's cable television. The whole world is right there in that village. People have cell phones, even some of the poorest, thanks to the good work of Grameen Phone and others. And because development has really not just trickled down from export industries, but really bubbled up from the hard work of those women and their families who take little loans and repay them with interest, there's greater opportunity. There's enrollment, boys and girls on par in primary school. You actually see a very vibrant, growing economy. And I think Bangladesh will be joining the ranks of what do we call them, the next 11 quite soon.
Tell me a little bit about BRAC. What's the purpose of this organization? What's your mission? What are the values of the organization? Share it with us.
Well, I used to call Bangladesh the Wall Street of development. Now I call it the Silicon Valley of social innovation, since Wall Street's reputation was a little tarnished. But I actually feel like because Bangladesh came of age as a new country just after the War of Liberation in 1971, that the young people at that time were called to a different path. They might have thought their life was going to go one way, and after experiencing this incredible war, they were called to do something about their new country, and to become part of the nation builders is why I think Bangladesh has given birth to some of the world's greatest social entrepreneurs. Muhammad Yunus, the founder of Grameen, won the Nobel Peace Prize, and Sir Fazli Hassan Abed, who was knighted by the Queen just a year or so ago because of his incredible work with BRAC, which all started just as an individual impulse, right? Abed actually had been part of the Liberation War movement. He had escaped, he'd been a Shell Oil executive, escaped when the war broke out via Pakistan and across the Khyber Pass, eventually got to London, So he was actively supporting and trying to make sure the British government would recognize Bangladesh when it was liberated. Once it happened, he sold his flat in London. He moved back and he used the majority of that money, I think it was like £12,000 or something, to start a small relief effort. The Bangladesh Rehabilitation Assistance Committee, he and his friends, set up this work in a very remote part of Bangladesh in the north, Sylhet, where most of the folks who run our restaurants come from. And he realized in starting to do this work that the problems were complicated, that it wasn't enough to just respond to the medical and health needs. People actually weren't literate. They needed to be educated. And it wasn't easy to start an educational program with adults. So he realized we should start it early on with the children. But most importantly, he realized people needed to work to be able to feed themselves. So as economies changed and became part of where money mattered, then people needed to start earning money. And so introducing microfinance, the ability of people to borrow money with interest without any collateral and repay that within a year to do something that they knew how to do, that was a major part of the development work in Bangladesh with BRAC. And they also realized, though, it's not enough to just lend and get the money back. They needed to help people figure out more and better things to do with their time. So how to increase the productivity of their labor. So that woman may be borrowing that $100 and raising a milk cow, or getting a couple of calves and raising them to give birth to others. But how much milk is that cow giving? So at that time, probably the Bangladeshi variety was only giving a liter or a liter and a half of milk a day. So what the ingenuity of Abed and BRAC did is figured out how to change, in fact, and improve the cow of Bangladesh. So today, on average, your Bangladeshi cow has been improved, that variety, to give 6 or 7 liters of milk a day. Now, it's not the Dutch cows that can give 12 or 15, but we have to have an appropriate cow that can eat enough to have the right fodder to be able to be productive. And so that's the application of science and knowledge, modern practices, access to productive inputs, and access to a market. Well, the market was a problem, so what did BRAC do? BRAC created a dairy, and today it's the number 2 dairy in Bangladesh, 27% market share, I think, with 100 chilling stations all over the country. Now, working on the value chain, whether it's milk or silk or chickens or ducks or corn or rice, all of these things are ways, they're strategies that help people develop their livelihoods. So it's not giving people charity, it's just unleashing their own productive capacity. And with better seeds that can germinate and produce 2-3 times the crop yields, that woman and that man's time becomes 3 times more productive. So that's the key to being able to get out of poverty. You help people to earn, you help them to build assets, help them to save. Gradually what they do, usually it takes maybe 4 loans before they can really start saving. Gradually what they're able to do is improve what they eat, because malnutrition, stunting and wasting is a very serious problem. Luckily it's gone down. Poverty in Bangladesh has been halved. Infant mortality has gone down. Maternal mortality has gone down. Education has gone up. Access to family planning has gone up. Now, a woman on average in Bangladesh will have 2 children. She used to have 6 children on average. And why? Because more than a quarter of those families' children didn't survive to age 5. So it's all connected. It's all connected, but it starts with her and that family and figuring out how you unravel the deep social and cultural and economic and political web that keeps people trapped in poverty. BRAC's a learning organization, right? So back in 1975, BRAC set up its first research and evaluation department. Why? Because the folks who were running BRAC wanted to know. It wasn't imposed by some donors or something. Any effective CEO has to know how she or he's doing. So of course we want to know if we're selling a product, if people like it. If our business is to defeat poverty, to improve malnutrition, to improve health, to get kids in school, we need to know how we're doing. So BRAC invested early on in becoming a learning organization. And so what you had is a continuous tweaking and testing, piloting new ideas, always innovating. In fact, it's like frugal innovation. It's hard for me to actually explain BRAC really well because it's like touching a part of the elephant. BRAC is a $1 billion balance sheet now. It works not just in Bangladesh, but in 10 other countries. It's a development organization that intends to help people get out of poverty themselves and create wider opportunity in education, in healthcare, in legal rights, in being able to defend and know their own human rights. And so if you think about an organization, it's not quite a typical NGO because they use so many business models in the approach. They've created social enterprises. In fact, many people call BRAC a social enterprise itself because 70% of its annual budget now is self-generated. Well, in terms of the scale and diversity of our interventions, we employ over 100,000 people. We're not the largest in terms of the number of countries, but everywhere we work in a deep way.
Can you give me some statistics on how many children you have educated over the years
Sure.
Through different BRAC programs?
If you just look at the education program, there's probably 9.5 million who have been graduated from BRAC schools. 4.5 million from our pre-primary schools, and another 5.5 from our primary schools. And these schools are, we'll sort of picture Little House on the Prairie, a one-room schoolhouse in a rented, often thatched, small hut, but with a teacher from the local area, always a female teacher. And the one-year pre-primary curriculum is designed to flip the switch on the joy of learning. So 100% of those children enroll successfully in government primary school. And the quality of government schools has been critiqued over the years, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. But those highly motivated BRAC students will stay and complete their primary school in government school, even if the quality is not good. And they test better than kids who didn't have that head start. Now, if you look at the BRAC primary schools, these are second chance schools. This is only to complement the government effort, because there are about 19 million school-going children in Bangladesh primary school, and maybe 15 million are in government school. So BRAC's program was designed to catch the students who were out of school because they were never enrolled, or they dropped out. And this is because of poverty and because of gender discrimination. So those students, through a compression, an accelerated learning opportunity, will go to school 4 years and complete all 5 years. They successfully graduate and transition into government secondary school, and we have much better results, again, on their test scores compared to government primary school. So we've figured out a very effective pathway to get poor children and poor girl children, 70% usually, we bias to girls, into school. Now, secondary school, to keep them in school, we've done different things to try to work and support the government's programs. We've built special facilities like toilets. Sanitation is a key barrier why girls will drop out when they become adolescents. We've helped to improve the quality of teacher training. We've also provided scholarships. And it's extremely important, you know, that free school that a poor child can go to in primary school for $32 a year. Only $32. When he or she graduates and gets into secondary school, a poor child will often have pressure on them to drop out. So for us to be able to provide a small scholarship for these poor but very academically talented children, it's been a lifeline to keep them in school. And now we've been able to actually award scholarships for many of them to go to university. Both BRAC University, which we started now 11 years ago, as well as universities in China, in India, because of the philanthropy of generous individuals in those countries.
Why do you think BRAC became so successful? What are the strategies that applied that make them so successful? If you have to go back and put it in a framework, do you have a framework? Can you tell me these are the 5 reasons or 2 reasons why they became successful?
I think many good PhD students who are trying to figure out the secret of the sauce on why BRAC is so successful. And there are many authors now who are writing about BRAC. If you ask me, I've been trying to figure out, why does BRAC work? What's the unique aspects about this organization? And I would say one, BRAC actually listened deeply to the communities that they were working with when they started, and have continued that practice. In going and working with really poor folks and living with them and understanding them, in sharing their joys and their pains, you become, I think, deeply appreciative of their talents and capabilities, so that you're able to pull on the inherent strengths of your customer base, right? So listening is one, participation is number 2. BRAC does not assume that they are there to do something to or for someone else who's passive. No. The real way that people improve their lives is people are involved. You know, I can't develop you, right? If you want to get an education, you've got to experience the joy of learning. It's not like you're an empty vessel and I can just pour the books into your head. No. So figuring out how to help people come out of their depression or their malaise, or maybe just have enough food inside their bodies so that they can begin to use their energy more productively, and importantly, to find hope. That is the most important thing for stimulating people's participation in creating a better future, right? 3, I would say that BRAC's secret is in being a frugal innovator. This wonderful method of being able to pilot test ideas, figure out how to make it efficient, and figure out first how to make it effective. And then once it's effective, make it efficient. You know, if you ask 10 questions and you only need 7, cut 3 out and then scale it. So the pathway for scaling up solutions the size of the problem are inherently grounded in BRAC's approach to innovation. And I think 4, that orientation as a learning organization is absolutely critical, because what works today or next year may not work in 5 years or 10 years. Bangladesh, as I described, is a radically different place today than it used to be in the time I lived there. And when we start working in a country like South Sudan, a brand new independent country, they need everything. When we started 5 years ago in Uganda, it was a very different country, much more developed in many respects, and yet still having problems like Bangladesh did in the 70s. Women having an average of 6 babies, not having access to control their own fertility, not having enough good work, not having access to markets, not being able to match the skills and the talents with market demand for goods and services, not being able to get credit to be able to start your own business idea. not having the health care where you lived. You know, the rural side, the countryside is very neglected in most places. And so you've got this pull into capital cities, and urbanization as a result has its own problems. So the learning organization aspect is absolutely key to figuring out what's going to work and keep working. And that's, I think, what we call adaptive planning now. And the last thing I would say, and there are probably many more, but the fifth secret of the sauce, I believe, is BRAC chose to invest in working with and through women as a catalyst for change, and really investing in unleashing the talents of people. So BRAC is like a human capital machine. In the US context, we might know McDonald's is the first employer of most young people, right, with barely a high school degree. But McDonald's will hire you and teach you about work discipline and, you know, all these things, employability skills. BRAC is a huge employer, not just in Bangladesh, but we employ 2,000 people in Uganda. When we start in a country, we quickly become, in just 3, 4, 5 years, the largest employer. People name bus stops after BRAC. And part of what this skill is, it's a skill of being able to see the talent when it's just a raw diamond in the rough. And then if you're growing, you can promote very rapidly. You can invest in making sure that your staff get access to training and ideas. And key is for them to keep learning on the job, because BRAC never spends a lot of time doing long training courses. You know, I think our longest one ever might be 2 weeks. Then we put them on the job and then have refreshers once a month. It's continuous supervision, it's learning on the job, it's refresher training, it's fast pathways for promotion. It's basically investing in people who are closest to the problem and who have a vested interest in solving that problem.
How do you define social entrepreneurship?
Social entrepreneurship is the phenomena where people are using their talents and energies and entrepreneurial drive, similar to business entrepreneurs, to solve social problems and to try to create real systems change, which is often what business entrepreneurs do when they're disruptors, introducing a new business with new technology and changes the way we do things. Steve Jobs is probably, you know, one of or Bill Gates, the icons of business entrepreneurship. I like to think of Sir Fazli Hassan Abed and Muhammad Yunus as the equivalents as social entrepreneurs. Now they're very similar in many respects, and that's a good thing. When in fact we can see all business producing not just jobs, which create social value, but all business creates positive benefits for people and the planet, then we maybe won't need this term social and business entrepreneurship. So that's part of it. Social entrepreneurs are actually transforming the nature of business as well as influencing the quality of governance, and most importantly, improving the way we live, work, love, share the planet.
A lot of companies out there, they are in the profit sector, but they figured out a way to integrate philanthropy and still stayed as a for-profit organization. Do you see a future merge between the social entrepreneurship and business entrepreneurship?
I don't think the most important aspect is whether something is for-profit or not for-profit. I think the question is who benefits from those profits. And in the case of, for example, Grameen Bank, it is a for-profit bank. It happens to be owned by the poor women themselves, the majority of that. So it's more like a cooperative bank than Citibank or JP Morgan, right? what's the mission? What's the purpose? You can create a company and a small percentage of those profits maybe go to do some charity. And that's good, but that's more traditional philanthropy. Or you can try to create a company that actually has zero waste, maybe zero carbon footprint. It's trying to look at cradle-to-cradle concepts, so that, like interface carpet, where you're not only trying to make a profit, you're trying to change the way the carpet industry works, right? So in trying to think about business as a vehicle, not just for profits to be made or jobs to be created, because there are many things that we create that produce products that are just not necessary. I really think the entrepreneurs who are working on things that are essential for life and well-being are the ones that are going to be sustained in the future. And that is where social and business are merging. Because within BRAC, we have many for-profit businesses. The question is what are we doing with it? Why did we create them, and what are we doing with them? Why did we create a dairy? Why did we create a retail chain store like the Bloomingdale's of Bangladesh? It's called Arong. We have 12 outlets, a turnover of, I think this year, about $60 million.
I like their product a lot.
Why did we do that? We did it because women living all over the countryside have these great skills for embroidery or to make beautiful silk, but they had no way to get their products to market, and they didn't know what would be in fashion. What color would the young urban elites be wanting to buy this season? So by creating a social enterprise, BRAC is able to use the business model, have 65,000 people working in the countryside, and be able to reinvest half the profit in growing the business and half the profit in paying for essential health care for the poorest of the poor. That is the way social and business entrepreneurship are coming together. And I think in the future, you're going to see really a coming together of these interests, because it is in the interests of our planet to figure out how do we survive. Climate change is very real. Yeah, it will affect us all. Pollution is not just something that somebody else has to worry about. It's the essentials for air and water, a clean food chain. That's what's going to drive business to change the way they do business, because customers will demand it, shareholders will demand it, and the entrepreneurs, his or herself, they will demand it from themselves.
There's an overall perception that if you work in the social business, you won't be able to become financially successful. It's not my perception. I don't believe on that. How do you attract young talent to work in social business sector?
People are motivated by many different things in life. And in my experience, they're deeply motivated by wanting to do something for others, wanting to be part of something larger than themselves. It's a very satisfying experience to be of service. So money, while it's important to meet your basic needs, is not the principal motivator for most people. And in fact, when you talk to people who've made a lot of money, that's not what's satisfying them. In fact, many of them, if they've only focused on making money, feel very hollow inside. And that's why they go searching for being part of a philanthropic community. And they start their foundations. They start a learning journey at age, 50 or 60. I mean, just read George Soros's, the new book about him, Chuck Sedekat's book. He talks fabulously about why he invests in BRAC and some of the reasons, but he also shares his approach to philanthropy, or Bill Gates, or Pierre Omidyar. I mean, you can probably name all of the large, successful business entrepreneurs that now are involved in philanthropy, and they're all my supporters. And I receive not only grant money, but debt and equity, and we're trying to make things happen that will solve problems on a scale that moves the needle on these problems. And I think the motivation then to young people as they see the icons of the business world also now really excited about the social entrepreneurship path. And they see the best schools having programs teaching microfinance, social entrepreneurship, base of the pyramid, value chain work. And so there's a lot of energy, I think, being generated, whether it's out of Silicon Valley or here, our own Silicon Alley or Wall Street. There are tons of people hungry to drop out of that rat race and to get into our space. And I am welcoming them with open arms, because we need the best brains and the best talent to apply our ingenuity and skills to solve these problems. They're urgent problems. And what we do to attract talent is try to have people be able to find meaning in their work, to see that they're part of a bigger cause, and to take pride in the fact that this is an award-winning, highly respected organization, and that the work has great meaning. But it's not really whether it's the Hilton Humanitarian Prize or the Henry Kravitz Prize for Innovation or Nobel's, it's not those external things that really in the end motivate people. I have talked to thousands of BRAC staff, and the thing that really keeps them day after day doing that very hard work, walking through rain and mud, is the sparkle in the eyes and the smiles on the faces of their customers. They know they're making a difference to those women and those families, and there's no better.
What do you think makes a great leader?
I suppose ability to listen, to have the courage of your convictions, even in the face of strong opposition. So a strong ethical rudder, and a vision. People will follow you if they agree and are excited about where you're leading. I generally approach leadership in a collaborative way. And I don't know if you've read about servant leadership styles
Yes.
or something, but I actually think that's an effective approach to leadership. And more now collaborative leadership is required. So it's not the kind of the big man theory, but it's how are we effective in networks, networked societies, matrix organizations, network organizations. And I think the bottom line is you just need to be authentic. People know if you're faking it. People can detect frauds, a mile away. And social entrepreneurs have the ability to produce great organizations and often build great social movements, but they never do it alone. And so your ability to persuade people to work with you around an exciting common vision and mission means that success will have the fingerprints of many. As we say, right, success has many fathers and mothers, right? Failure is the orphan. Mm-hmm. So the best thing you can do is take your ego out of the equation, lead from behind, lead by example, because people will watch what you do more than listen to what you say.
So I want to find out from you some of your failure story and how those failures shaped your business and personal life?
Well, there are lots of failures. I think rarely do we get a chance to talk much about them. So thank you for the question, Russell. When you said failure, I immediately thought about probably back in the 90s when I had taken on another nonprofit and had really built it into a fairly significant organization over a 5-year period, the Women's Environment and Development Organization. And it had a very strong board of co-founders. And in the wake of the death of the principal founder, the president of the organization, former Congresswoman Bella Abzug, after we did this beautiful memorial in the United Nations, first time ever that the General Assembly had been opened for an ordinary citizen. But we managed to pull that off and have all kinds of celebrities from the UN to Shirley MacLaine and, Wangari Maathai, great heroes of mine. After all of that, I hadn't brought the organization along with me. And basically, I got the eject button. I mean, they give me a sabbatical, but it was time for me to go. And it was heartbreaking because I didn't understand, after working so hard and killing myself, how could they have done that to me? In the aging process, some wisdom comes from that. And I realized that I was in a hurry. I was so much in a hurry that I hadn't adequately listened to people. I hadn't really built the collaborative tissue that I needed to be able to weather such a major event, right? And when you have very powerful leaders in their absence upon a sudden death in particular, you have many turbulent forces at work. And so for me it was a learning that I'm now applying, of course, in other work and other organizations as I have taken on the building of BRAC USA. I think I try to remain quite humble about my position and to always be having an eye towards succession strategy, not just within our own organization, but also with the BRAC family of organizations. And I think if you realize that even as the CEO, even as the entrepreneur, we all need to be replaceable if the dream stays alive. And that creates a different way of building your team, building your talent, and of just seeing the sweep of life.